Like when you're first recovering, everything's on fire. There are still embers burning. Like you put the fire out, you put the source of the fire out. Now it's about stepping back and saying, okay, where are the other embers that are burning so we can stop that fire? So finances is one of them. Like I said, relationships is another one. But part of putting that out and then rebuilding is you've got to have a solid foundation.
Hey, well, welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding Life After Addiction. My name is Justin Franich, and I'm here with my friend Jacob Dobscha. I'm glad to be able to sit down again and really wanted to talk about the topic of finances. A lot of guys in recovery, people coming out of a lifestyle of active addiction, when they switch from the life they were living to the new life, there's a lot of wreckage, a lot of financial wreckage specifically. And so really just wanted to kind of help some people kind of think through that. You know, everybody loves to talk about money.
Right.
And so I figure it's a good time to kind of chat about that. So why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll jump into our discussion.
Yeah, so it's good to be here. I'm Jacob Dobscha. I'm a business insurance agent at LD&B in Little Harrisonburg, or big, depending on your perspective, Harrisonburg, Virginia. So that's what I do. I also am very passionate about helping people get their finances together, budgeting, you know, just using common sense, everything that we weren't taught as kids. Maybe you were, I wasn't. I do like the idea. It seems like there's a lot of schools that are coming up with like curriculum to teach kids common sense. Here's how you budget. Here's how you balance a checkbook, that type of stuff. So I'm very passionate about that because I didn't have that growing up. And when I first got married, I realized, holy cow, there's more going out than coming in. How does that work? And just, you know, giving every dollar a name and all that stuff. So I've done a lot with some of Dave Ramsey's curriculum, and I'll probably talk about that at some point today, but I just think there's a lot of different ways to do money, and I just think that one's a really simple way. And so I like that. So
I mean, hypothetically, let's just say I am fresh out of a program. I've got a pile of debt. I've got a credit score that is abysmal, and I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Where do I start?
First of all, it's really, really good that you recognize that everything's a mess, right? And it is really hard because I feel like a lot of times what happens is when you're looking at money, you look at your bank account, you're looking at all the chaos around that. And so, I mean, the first thing is to stop, take a deep breath. We talked about this before, but you just overcame a huge thing. You overcame an addiction to a drug that and whatever that addiction is, maybe it's not a drug, but it leads to a lot of death. The first thing is to stop, slow down, take a deep breath. And I mean, if you just sit down and write out what all of your expenses are, and then figure out what all your income is, that's a really good first step. Because you got to know what you're working with. And some people are so overwhelmed by it that they're just like, I can't even think about that. And it is stressful. But you have to do that. That's like step one, is sit down and give it a name, give every dollar a name, figure out, okay, what do I owe? And then from there, you can step back and say, okay, how do I find that kind of money? It's
on, I guess, just honesty about how big the mess is.
Right.
Because, you know, if we don't know how big the mess is, how do we know what type of cleaning supplies that we need to apply to clean the mess up?
I've heard you talk about this before too. I mean, like a lot of what you're doing at Teen Challenge and a lot of what Sober Living is about reestablishing, oh my gosh, like, what do I do when I'm bored? Is it okay for me to be bored? Yes, it's totally okay. And so I love what you guys are doing where I've been on hikes with you and a group of guys before. And then this is part of that journey. So don't disregard that, like, because it is really hard. I've known people that have gone through addiction recovery where they're like, yes, I did it. I got through it. And then they're like, oh crap. Now I've got to deal with my finances. Now I've got to deal with my relationships. You know, it is a lot, but this is all part of that journey to getting back to healing, really, and getting back to who God made you to be.
One thing I notice is people have this tendency to like, I don't want to say, I'll just be plain spoken like Dave, like they don't grow up into the adult world and like actually want to interact with the system. And so it's like a lot of cash stuff, working under the table, you know what I'm saying? Versus like, I don't know if there's just this fear from not going to the bank, but like how important is that we actually like get ourselves back into like the normal system, if you will, for society as a starting point?
A huge part of that is really, it's part of, like you just alluded to, it's part of growing up. Like, I don't want to call it that, like, cause it's a little degrading, but like that really is part of growing up, is you do need to get a big boy or a big girl job, right? Most of the world is electronic now. You're gonna have a hard time operating and doing a lot of business, whether it's paying your mortgage, whether it is paying rent, whether it is paying your phone bill even, unless you have a bank account, and you've got and you've got money regularly coming in.
Talk about Dave, and I know you're a big fan of Dave.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he gets a lot of flack on social media, especially younger generations now, just because how anti-credit he is, right?
Yes.
And society's changed since Dave started doing things, and while some of that may be true, the one thing I do love about Dave is it's very practical.
Yes.
Like, here's a step, here's a plan that I can follow. And so let's go right into that, because I think that's a really relevant part of the conversation. I've got out, I've got my job, I have an understanding of what the mess is.
Yeah.
Right. I know where I'm standing right now. I know all my debts. I know my mess. What do I do from here?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak to this as somebody who went through and did what Dave Ramsey calls the 7 baby steps. There are other plans out there. I feel like within the finance world, if you start searching that and go down that rabbit trail, there are so many that I can't wrap my head around. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not smart enough. I don't know. Dave dumbed it down enough for me to make sense. So the first thing he says is to get your finances under control is first save $1,000. That's a really low number. Like if you ever listen to his radio program or watch his stuff, people call in all the time. Oh my gosh, shouldn't I have more than that? Shouldn't I have more than that? Listen, this is step one. Put $1,000 in the bank and separate it from your everyday expenses. So once you put that $1,000 aside, then you're going to go ahead and start attacking your debt. This is the part that I love the most because it's the debt snowball. So I'm a big fan of that. Basically, where you look at all your debts, you look at the total amounts of each, and you find the one that had the lowest amount. Interest rates don't matter, and there's a strategy behind this because what we're doing is behavior modification. You pay off the smallest debts first, and then you're creating a budget before all of this as well. You're paying off your debt snowball, so you pay the smallest off first, but then you're taking that amount that you were paying down on the smallest one, and you're rolling that into the next one. So you're doing minimum payments on all your other debts, and you're just trying to pay down the smallest one. What that does is it creates a snowball, and it rolls and rolls and rolls. You got that baby going. It's hard to stop it.
How do I walk through that though, and know? So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, I don't have enough money coming in to pay my minimums. When I first get home, I've got a lower level job. I have to take something that's not covering everything. Like what do I do there? Because I know like the debt companies are relentless in calling, especially right as these guys or gals are getting back on the grid. Phones and letters and stuff start blowing up. And so what do I do with that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things there. I mean, one of the things Dave Ramsey talks about is getting gazelle intense. And what that means is when you see a lion or a tiger or whatever animal chasing a gazelle, the lion and the tiger are chasing after lunch. The gazelle is running for their life. That's what gazelle intensity is. You're running with all your life. You're pouring yourself into this because you're trying to get yourself out of the mess that you got yourself into. And this, unfortunately, yes, you are forgiven, you are covered by sin, but you've still got to deal with the consequences of what that life was. So that's one. The other thing is paying attention to reaching out to each one of those debts. So a good example would be like medical. There are a lot of medical bills that you can actually call, and you actually, as long as you're making some type of a payment on them, and the laws may have changed by now. I'm not really sure. I should probably go back and verify that. But when we had a bunch of medical debt and we got 3 kids, we were able to pay just a little bit. And as long as we were paying a little bit on it, they didn't send it to collections at all because we were showing that we were paying it. A lot of times you can negotiate those numbers down a little bit more until you can get to them and then attack them. So
yeah, and the other side of it too is that even now, like being in a recovery program is not what it used to be 10 years ago.
Right.
They looked at you like the pariah of the earth. Now recovery is a lot more mainstream. People talk about it. And I think there's an importance of being willing to be transparent about that when you call people.
Yes.
Like, hey, I just got out of rehab. I'm trying to get things back together. And being honest about that is extremely important.
It is really important. And then part of that gazelle intensity does mean maybe 40 hours of work is not enough for you.
Yeah.
So you may need to work one job 40 hours and then work another job an extra 20 hours. Like you're getting yourself out of this mess. You're trying to reestablish yourself. And I mean, we've seen a lot of people that can do it. They can do it. They can get themselves out of the mess. And sometimes God comes alongside, especially if you're submitting to God and God is part of your journey to addiction recovery. And you start tithing, I've just seen where God can really multiply and he can do some amazing things with money. I've got a lot of stories around that. And that's part of the reason why I'm passionate about it as well. But that is a lot of it. It's just that you do have to be that intense. You may have to sacrifice, different things in order to get to the point where you can have those things again. But
Yeah.
you got to remember, it's just for a season. You've overcome an addiction. You've done the hard stuff. Now it's time for more hard stuff, but I would say it's not quite as hard as what you've already done.
First thing I'm doing is I'm putting $1,000 away. Then I'm squaring my budget up, understanding what I have coming in, what I've got going out, and I'm putting a plan on paper to start to pay my debts off. What am I doing next?
Once you are debt free, first of all, okay, you have overcome an addiction and now you are debt free. You are like crushing it. Okay. Like that's amazing. If you get to that point where you are debt free and you've overcome addiction, like a majority of Americans have debt.
Right.
We're not just talking about mortgage debt. We're talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. And so that's worth pause, celebrate. That is worth celebrating because it is a really big deal. You've also been gazelle tense. You've gotten to the point where now you are no longer living like everyone else, so pay that off. And then at that point, the baby step is to save up 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. That could be $10,000. That could be $60,000. Like it just depends on where you are, how much you want to save. And it depends on what you decide you're comfortable with. So that would be money in the bank that you have access to in the case of an emergency. My grandmother always talked about having an emergency credit card. I've got different family members and friends that always had an emergency credit card. A credit card is not an emergency. Using a credit card for an emergency is like throwing flames on a fire.
Right.
You're just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
I understand debt has its place in some strategies. That's fine. I get it. The borrower is slave to the lender. I do believe that. You do owe that person money.
Yeah.
So if you, I don't recommend going that route. I recommend like hunker down, get gazelle tense again, and do that. But if you've got 3 to 6 months worth of cash in the bank, you operate a lot differently than if you have an emergency credit card.
You know what's interesting is I think a lot of times like where I've tried to get slick and figure out like oh no, I see something different here. I'm gonna make this work, and maybe on once or twice I did get lucky or whatever, trying to get slick and trying to come up with strategies to fix this. Where there is really a beauty in the simplicity of this plan.
Yeah,
it's very straightforward, and I think almost like recovery is tying that back to just the normal is the daily disciplines that make the difference on whether that be in our discipleship or whatever. And so applying that same mindset to finances is really simple. And I think that's a good thing. All right, so after that, I've saved up money. What do I do next?
The actual baby steps say to start to put 15% of your money away for retirement. Start to save for retirement. Social Security, no one knows how much we're going to get. I used to think it was going to be gone. I'm not really sure that it's going to be gone by the time I'm older, but you should be planning like it's not going to be there. Start an IRA or start some form of savings plan. There are a lot of really good financial advisors out there. Happy to recommend some if you want to reach out to me. It's also worth considering whether or not you have a house that you own, because that's a huge strategy in making sure that you have a house that you own. That way, when you do retire, when you do get to the point where you're no longer having to work, you have a paid off house. So all you're paying now are taxes and insurance on that house. That's a really low cost of living, right? So you got one of two strategies. I would recommend putting 15% into retirement, letting the market work for you. The sooner you start doing that, the more that compounds and the more it's in your advantage. The more that it's in your advantage to do that.
Why should I wait until after my debt's paid off to start doing that? I mean, I've already wasted so much time.
The reason why is because 15% is just the minimum of what they recommend that you put down, or put towards your retirement. You have the opportunity to do that. Taking a step back, we're trying to get aggressive about paying down those debts. Those debts, you hear about some of these debts where people are paying the minimum payment and that number is not changing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's costing you so much. Part of the reason why you're paying off all your debt so that you can do all these things is so that you're freeing up that regular income that you can invest that income.
Yeah.
And you're still taking care of yourself. You're still paying for the 4 walls, which is like food, clothing, utilities, and house, the basic things you need to live. So you're still paying for that throughout the whole time, but you're trying to cut costs as much as possible so that you can attack that debt. You owe no man a dollar. And then you start to put 15% away of your annual income into retirement. Again, minimum, but you should also be considering, is now the time for me to buy a house? That's a huge asset that you really really need to have, and that should be part of your plan too. So I'm gonna say something that's a little like challenging. Yeah, do you need good credit to get a mortgage? Absolutely, no question. Do you need good credit to get a house? No, because guess what? This is crazy, but you were just, maybe you paid down $300,000 in 5 years. I wonder if you can save up $600,000 in 5 or 6 years now that you've got everything else paid down. And then you have enough that you can pay cash for a house.
Yeah.
So it just depends on your strategy. It depends on your appetite for some of the other ways that you can buy a house. I do have a mortgage, so I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a mortgage. It's just whatever works for you and your family. You do have to figure that out. It's worth considering, but man, like if I could do it and just pay cash for a house, dude, I would totally do it. That would be amazing.
This process of getting dug out, getting the emergency fund, getting the basics down, getting the debt paid off, getting the emergency fund down, before I start even really feeling like I'm thinking about the future. Like, how do people stay motivated? Because it can be a long journey, right? Like, I mean, there's a chance that you step out, you could really hustle, maybe get it done in a year or two, depending on how deep the hole is that you're digging yourself out of. But like, I mean, how does somebody stay motivated through that long process? Because it can almost feel like, man, I'm out here grinding, and I'm not really seeing the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will.
So there's a couple things you can do. One is there are some really great financial coaches out there. I do a little bit of that. I don't really, it's not something I heavily focus on, but I do that for like people that I like and friends and family, stuff like that. I certainly do that. But for me, what always helped me, I never actually reached out to a coach and talked to anybody, but what I remember, the reason why I did that is I remember what it was like first time I sat down and did a budget. I remember the chaos of that. Yeah. I remember growing up and thinking, man, I can't wait to learn about interest rates and how credit cards work and all that stuff. But then I look back and I go, oh my gosh, like we were not very good with money growing up, you know?
Yeah.
So, but there's a level of helplessness that comes with that. And so for me, the motivator, and I think for a lot of people, the motivator is, I'm never going back to that.
Yeah.
You know, even Dave Ramsey talks about, he was a big debt guy. Like he invested a lot of debt. The reason why he's so against it and he speaks out against it, like above and beyond what probably needs to, is because he got burned by it, you know? So he talks about how he lost everything and had to go home to his family and say, hey, we got to sell all we have. We're going bankrupt. We're going to have to rebuild everything. So that feeling of helplessness and that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm going to do, that is what I feel like is a good motivator. I'm never going to have that happen again. And you are walking alongside God with that too. But don't count yourself out just because you had an addiction. Like, people have done crazier stuff. There are people that are doctors that didn't start, training for a doctor until...
I was thinking about that too. You talk about the gazelle intense mode. And I remember when Ashley and I were working on some of our stuff early on, like I started reselling things. I started going thrift shopping and reselling things on eBay. Yep. And then I started video editing on the side, skills that I didn't have before. And like, it's interesting to see, like you go get a job, go get something that pays the bills, but then start thinking about other ways to earn income. And I think sometimes I love that the church has kind of shifted more into talking about kingdom entrepreneurship, in 2026, because it really wasn't a thing back in the day.
Right.
It was, the church was really, let's get you squared away to go to a third world country and not really do a lot of the business development training and helping people like kind of see those entrepreneurial gifts in them. And you and I have been talking about this a lot recently, but I think that the motivation or the encouragement here is that as you're starting to work on digging yourself out of the hole, you may begin to realize some of the gifts that exist in you and start trying some things on the side. And who knows, that side hustle could become your main job. It could be the main dish down the road once you start experimenting with things. And so I'd really love to see people do that, because I think it's impressive to see what you can come up with when you're trying to get yourself out of a hole.
I think the other thing is, I was just talking with somebody about this the other day. There's a really good book called The Monk and the Merchant that kind of brushes up on this topic. But I feel like, there are people that come out of addiction, and there are a lot of people that go right into ministry because they feel like, I got to stay close to God. That's what my calling is. Yeah. But there is something to be said for, sometimes God calls us to ministry in the pulpit, but sometimes God calls us to ministry in the marketplace. Yeah. Like, that's super important. Like, if that's what God's called you to, I feel like I've talked to so many people that like, so The Monk and the Merchant, to use that as an example, one of the things that they bring up is it's like this kid who loves God with all of his heart, and he goes to this monk and he's like, oh, what must I do? Blah, blah, blah. And so the monk from what I remember, I read it like in one sitting, like 5 or 6 years ago. The monk takes him to this beautiful cathedral, and he introduces him to the guy that's building, or like a fisherman or something like that. And basically, he's like, "Why are you introducing me to him?" He's like, "Well, you said you wanted to go to ministry, right?" And he's like, "You want to be close to God, right?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, this is my best friend." It's like, the cathedral we're sitting in, this beautiful cathedral from like, 1600s, like one of the old school Notre Dame type things, was completely built because this guy went out and funded the entire thing.
Wow.
So there's a lot of power to being called to ministry in the marketplace just as much as being called to ministry in the pulpit. You're not going to be seen as much, but you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
We're in the kingdom. God sees everything we do.
Well, I think the other side of that too is that even ministry and business ministry, or ministry, like the fivefold giftings, like God calls us to solve a problem in the world. Yeah. Period. Right. And the problem I've been called to solve as a minister is helping people with addiction. Yep. That's my purpose. That's the unique purpose. And it shows up like today. I'm selling couches to make that happen. Right. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing with business. Like God calls you to solve a problem for people. And the more problems you solve for people, the more you meet needs for people, the more successful you are as business. And that's where I think sometimes the theology gets mixed up. Agreed. But we only are successful in business or ministry when we serve people. There's an exchange that takes place. They give us money for serving them well, and really it is a service unto God, no matter what it is. So
what you're saying is Chick-fil-A is God's chicken.
It is. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah. It's crazy. That was the first Yeah,
that's right. You did work at Chick-fil-A first.
I did.
And that's right.
And that was the first because I did what you said. I got out of the teen challenge, and it was straight into working for the ministry. Yep. And I almost had this false sense of like, honestly, part of me was a little scared to step out and do anything else. That area was protection. But then the other part of me was like, well, if I'm going to be all in for God, I need to suffer and sacrifice and all of that. And it works. Don't get me wrong. But I think we learned some things, down the road. So then the last baby step, you talked about 4, 5, and 6. What's the last one? When have I reached the pinnacle? Am I finished with this thing?
And then the last step is the one that I can't wait to get to, which is build wealth and give. Yeah. So there's a point to building. So at this point, you're completely out of debt. You are, you're paying all the things you have to pay. You're paying for the 4 walls. You're probably getting some nice stuff. If you want to drive a Mercedes, you want to drive a brand new Dodge truck, you've got enough money, you can do it. You get to decide where your money goes, right? The bigger thing, and the reason why I'm excited about it more, is because that's when it's time to build wealth and give. The give part gets me really excited, Like I want to have something left behind for my kids when I go, but I also really I've had so many situations in my life, both as a married man for my family, but then as a kid too, where I've been the recipient of a huge blessing. Yeah. And that sowed a seed deep in my heart that I'm like, man, I want to be on the other end of this. I want to be able to bless people when I see that need, because I've been in that situation where, oh my gosh, we might get kicked out of our house because we don't have, rent for next month.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been in that situation, and I remember that vividly. And so that's, I don't know, when I grew up, I just always remember that. And I tell that story all the time about, not that weekend where we didn't know, and then God basically completely flipped it. I don't know if you want to hear the story or not. I mean, I'm happy to tell you.
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So basically when I was in 6th or 7th grade, my 7th grade, my parents split up, and they ultimately ended up divorcing. It was kind of an interesting situation, because, I didn't grow up. Neither one of them were in church when I was growing up. When I was about 8 or 9, they split up, and then they got back together, and we all started going to church. It was a dramatic shift. And I remember, and it was real. It was very real. I remember before and after that. And I remember the impact that Jesus had on my family, which was awesome. And, I went a couple years, and then when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I guess my parents decided not to, it wasn't working out or whatever. I'm doing the Cliff Notes version. So they ended up getting a divorce. And so we stayed with my mom. We stayed in the same house we were. We moved a lot though, so we'd only been there for a year. And my mom started getting really serious about her faith, and she was getting baptized at the church we were at. It was gonna name drop the church or
if you want, yeah.
So it was a Cornerstone Church of Broadway. Actually, it was back in 98, 99, I think, something like that. And I remember she told me that she really felt like God was calling her to put her entire paycheck, which happened to be the amount of our rent that was due the following week. She felt like God was calling her to make a sacrifice and to put that check in the offering plate. And she did. And then she got up and she gave a testimony about it. And it was not, I remember hearing her heart in that situation, how real it was. You know, at that point, that was when I really grew up, because my parents had split up, and I kind of realized, like, oh, it's me. It's like I've got to take care of I didn't pay rent, but I've got to take care of myself emotionally, spiritually, all that stuff, you know, whatever. I've got to make a decision whether I'm going to follow God or not. And I did. I'm not perfect or anything, but that was kind of the moment where I started taking my faith really serious at some point in that season. And then my mom got up and she gave testimony about how that happened. And I remember hearing that, and I remember thinking the testimony is that she gave her last penny, kind of like, you know, story in the Bible of the penniless widow, the widow that put her last 2 cents in the offering, and Jesus said that's a huge blessing. I remember that being the celebration. I remember there were a lot of people that were like cheering, and then after the service, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but basically a whole bunch of people kept coming up to my mom and like congratulating her on being baptized, and then giving her money. And then one of the pastors actually pulled her aside after the service and was like, "Hey, look, we've got like a whole bunch of people here that really want to help you out. Like, you're a single mom, you've got 3 kids. And basically, from what I remember, our bills were pretty much paid for like 6 months. Like, the church just paid our bills. So that for me, mentally, that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about money. And it's not because I want to be rich and I want to have all the stuff. It's because I want to be able to give. I want to be able to be a blessing. And so that's kind of what's waiting on the other side of that. If you can get, you know, you got yourself right. You got yourself out of an addiction. You got yourself out of the mess, whatever that is. It might not even be addiction. You've got a lot of people that listen on this. So whatever that mess is, you got yourself out of that. You're starting to clean it up. It's worth it in the end, because you can get to the point where you see other people that maybe struggle with some of the things that you did, and you can start to be a blessing to them.
We have things happen in our lives, and it kind of shifts our perspective on how we see the world going forward. And I've thought a lot about that with my kids. Like, you know, like from 17 to 22, like I was, even when I got clean, like I just didn't take the money thing seriously. Right. Wasn't really thinking about it. Let me just go all in on this ministry thing, and God will provide. And yes, he did. Right. But like now I get the opportunity to teach Chloe, like, hey, do what you're supposed to do now with this. Save money, treat it correctly. And she's 17 and she's got the wherewithal of a 30-year-old. Like, she's figuring this thing out. But then the conversation's just different. Yeah. You do this well now. When you're 21, you'll be able to do what you want. Right. And you'll have the patience and the time. You can go to college, or you can go try to start a business, but you'll have the freedom to figure that out.
Go buy your BMW.
Right, because you're making the choices now. And man, that's really good. And so, Jacob, let me as we wrap up, man, just so you do some financial coaching, but mainly right now your main focus is business insurance and whatnot. So just give people a shout out, tell them how they can find you. Yep. You'll be tagged in this post on Facebook, and I'll put the stuff in the comments in the description on YouTube. But
LinkedIn, best place to find me. But yeah, so I look at it as I get to serve the community through business insurance. So I do a little bit of every insurance as far as like property and casualty, like your liability, your car, your house, all that stuff. But I really focus on the business side of it. So business owners just have a unique set of, you know, risk and everything like that they have to manage. So that's what I get to do. Just meet with business owners, learn about their business, and then make sure that they're fully covered with all the operations that they do. I do a lot with churches and sober living homes and nonprofits. That's my favorite. My background is more actually in schools. And so I'm still kind of connecting all of that. But so far, it's just been really fun meeting other pastors, learning about their operations, how they serve their community, learning about sober living homes. I did not realize like how different the strategies are for helping people in that arena. And so that's been a lot of fun. We're doing really, really well with that. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I've been focused on. For those of you, my friends who follow and are in the recovery space, if you run a recovery program, sober living, discipleship program, whatever, Jacob was able to get us insured and save us some money. So I would encourage you to reach out to him on that.
for those of you who are watching, jump in the conversation. What's been one thing that's worked for you when it comes to money? Are you a Dave Ramsey fan? Do you follow the debt snowball and the no debt and the baby steps to a T? Or are you a Dave Ramsey modified? Maybe add some extra soy milk or whatever in there. Or do you have a completely different strategy and we just both, neither of us know what we're talking about? Drop that in the comments below and let us know. Thank you, Jacob, for sitting down and chatting. And thank you guys for watching and joining along. Please like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon. God bless.